Kyiv was targeted by Russia 3 times in 24 hours. And to talk more about that now, let's go to Kyiv live with our correspondent Gulliver Cragg. Gulliver, what kind of reaction has there been in Kyiv to these new strikes?
You mean the strikes on Moscow that took place this morning? Drone strikes, apparently all intercepted, according to the Russian authorities. And the reaction in Kyiv has, on an emotional level, I think, been one of some satisfaction. Everybody who's commenting it, whether it's officials or just ordinary people, seem to think that it's quite nice to see the Russians getting a little bit of a taste of their own medicine. Officially, Ukraine says that it is not directly involved in these attacks. That was the statement made by Mikhailo Podolyak, senior advisor to President Zelensky. Yuri Ignat, the spokesman for Ukraine's Air Force, said something similar, suggesting that this was the result of internal conflicts in Russia. This famous Free Russia Legion, for example, that made incursions onto Russian territory in Belgorod region not long ago. So that seems to be the official line that the Ukrainians are taking, but with a somewhat tongue-in-cheek attitude, suggesting that they probably coordinated at the very least with these Russians who are against Putin and who may or may not be behind these attacks. I have, though, heard pundits on the radio discussing whether or not this is really the way for Ukraine to be going. Although they said emotionally, one's initial reaction is to smile when one sees drones attacking Moscow and seeing that Russians perhaps also had a sleepless night. It's really questionable, they were suggesting, whether this is militarily going to be very useful to Ukraine, even in propaganda terms, in terms of communication. Is it going to turn Russians against Putin's regime? It's hard to see any evidence of that happening. And they were suggesting that Ukraine's resources might be better used to attack oil depots, military installations, and other targets closer to the Ukrainian border in regions of Russia where it's clearer how those regions are helping the Russian military effort with its invasion of Ukraine.
All right, Gulliver, it does seem like there is some sound issues going on behind you. But again, just let's come back to Kyiv. Tell us about the situation there and how people have been reacting to the strikes there, that unusual daytime strike, and how bad it was actually in regard to damages there in Kyiv.
Well, I think that's probably the sound interference that you're hearing, because behind me is the residential building in Kyiv that was the worst hit last night, apparently by an intercepted drone that didn't fully disintegrate before slamming into the upper floors of the apartment building. Behind me, clean-up operations are underway now, clearing the debris, throwing things out of the windows. You hear them very loudly crashing to the ground. It's clear that a large number of the apartments in this building have suffered some damage. 12 are reported to be destroyed. In this building, one civilian was killed, several were injured. Across the capital as a whole, with 6 districts being hit, some 13 civilians were reported injured. And the Ukrainian authorities say that 29 drones out of 31 were intercepted, which means 2 hit their targets. We don't know what those targets were. It's possible they were military targets, but we don't know. There's been no official announcement about that.
Gulliver, thank you for that. Gulliver Cragg reporting from Kyiv.